Our hero Roy remembers his mom telling him to live freely, but he's way too tied down by duty. And right at the Empire's border, a hooded figure everyone thinks is the Great Dark Mage just appeared and completely nuked the entire battlefield with a single spell. After Eclipse absolutely wrecked most of the army, the survivors ran away in total terror, so he told his allies to stop the chase while they cheered for him. But then he revealed he's Cloud, the legendary white swordsman of Albius, checked on his knights who were totally freaked out after the attack on Lutetia, and when he saw them stressing over shadows in the mountains, he just sliced the entire mountain in half to clear their view. With the mountain sliced clean in half, the enemy army totally panicked because they never expected the Holy White Sword to show up. But Cloud figured it was all just a big trick so the knights could. After finishing his missions as a swordsman, a saint, and a sage, he finally heads back to the Berlin Duchy, where he drops his disguise the second he gets to his room, completely. He keeps his secret identities on the down low because showing up to school with those legendary titles would be a total disaster, and since he's always running on zero sleep, Sister Reena walked in with his lunch and was totally shocked to see him ready to go way earlier than usual, so she asked him to cover the afternoon activities, and since he was down for it, she suggested they just eat together right now. Roy was stoked to have such a successful sister, but she warned him to stop being lazy, or he'd end up as a total joke of a nobleman. Roy didn't really care what people called him as long as he could chill, but Rin was losing her mind because he was late to the academy every single day. He was failing all his training, had zero friends, and just sat at his desk like a ghost, making everyone think he was only there as a pity case. Roy stayed chill, remembering how Glass Rain Academy was a big team-up between three kingdoms to train the best of the best, and since he was Berlin's pick, he was stuck with. Even though he's the strongest, he knew Reena would worry if she saw his serious face, so she stepped closer and told him he could always talk to her. She told Roy he wasn't alone and she'd always have his back, but he got all flustered and told her to leave because he couldn't handle how sweet she was being. He heads off to tell someone about everything that went down last night, but the moment he walks into their room, he's completely stunned by what he finds. Roy's dad, Linus Level, is the big boss of the family, and was hanging out with the maid when he asked Roy why he'd come by, so Roy dropped the news that the Halley Empire was absolutely massive and ruled over nearly half the entire continent. The Emperor is going wild taking over land, and Roy thinks he's totally crossing the line, so Linus asks if he's still stressed about those kids getting kidnapped 5 years ago. I warned them that Reena is one of those kids and their country is in serious trouble, making Linus realize that the saboteurs who got wiped out before Ray arrived were actually taken down. Roy's whole reason for protecting everyone is his mom, a total hero who died on the battlefield 12 years ago while saving her family. Before her final mission, she told Roy to live his life freely, but he feels bad that he can't do it yet, so he just keeps coughing and working his heart out. Reaching the top was a massive struggle because he insisted on protecting Reena and his family with nothing but his own power. The next day, Roy strolls into class late as usual, and the whole room starts roasting him. But he just ignores the hate and goes straight to sleep while everyone whispers about how a total loser like him could come from such a legendary family, especially since his dad is a hero who literally united 3 whole nations. His mom was actually a secret swordmaster and a total hero who risked it all for her family and her country. Roy's brother worked for the king, and his sister Reena was. Rory remembers that out of the 10 titled sword demons, the strongest is the Sword Saint, just like how the top-tier mages in Lutetia are known as sages. Every student in school was obsessed with those two, but our guy couldn't care less and just did his own thing. Roy just wants to kick back and relax, but the professor is totally shocked to see him in class, and as soon as the bell rings, he tells everyone they're doing live combat training today, and to head straight to the training grounds. Roy was totally annoyed because he just wanted a chill day, so when the teacher promised a huge reward for the top student, Roy was already planning to lose on purpose and just slack off. That's when the teacher introduced Roy to his. Right there was the super pretty Yukina Crawford, a 3rd year from their academy who was so famous even Roy knew her name. He might have lost, but that match was no joke, and now she's stepping into position to greet Roy. They barely finished saying hi before the fight started, and she was the first one to strike. Roy noticed she was aiming right for his blade, so he just kept blocking her attacks with a look of pure terror on his face. He thought about throwing the match, but he knew that'd be wrong since Yukina was the heir to the legendary Sword Saint, and her 3rd place rank among the 10 sword demons proved she was a total prodigy. She's a perfect match to sync with that sword, but she's still nowhere near the world's top 7 fighters because of one major flaw, and even though Roy is dying to, he leaned in to point out her weak spot, and she got super flustered because he was way too close. Ward decided to help her out a bit by pointing out all her major weak spots. Yukina was happy for the help, but still thought she'd win, while Roy realized her all-attack style worked on normal students, but would get her wrecked by anyone who actually knows defense is the most important part. Roy slammed Yukina's right arm to hit her right where it hurts, and she immediately squared up to go all out on her next move. Roy saw she was targeting the demon on the right, so he played along and faked a miss, but he was totally shocked to find out Yukina had magical eyes since he knew they were nothing but trouble. These rare magical eyes only show up in the strongest mages, and she's got a top-tier wolf's eye that lets her see every move coming, so Roy is terrified she'll figure out he's just faking his loss to the villain. He had to hide his real power again because if anyone realized he was actually stronger than Yukina, it would cause way too much trouble, leaving him totally stuck while she kept landing hit after hit. She switched things up with a totally different move, but Roy saw it coming and just let his sword take the hit and go flying. He had to admit he lost because her skills were honestly on a whole other level. Once school wrapped up, Roy headed home and realized that since everyone thinks he's just a lazy nobody, he can finally go all out and switch to his secret role. He used his doll magic to leave a fake version of himself in the attic to take his place. Roy had actually warped to the kingdom of Oldeos to play the white swordsman Cloud, swapping places with a doll that recorded everything, so now he knows exactly what went down while he was gone. This room is his secret hideout that nobody else knows about, and since everyone thinks he's just wandering around, they have no clue where he is. So he puts on his sword-sane suit. The whole castle cheered for the world's strongest swordsman as Cloud smiled and headed to the throne room, where the king was panicking over scary reports about monsters, but the room went dead silent. King Albert is a total legend, and people say he's the only one who could actually team up with their longtime enemy, Lutetia. Take Cloud Boudre. He showed the king some respect and said politics isn't really his vibe, but he still had one major thing to say. This dude was so cracked he could have soloed an entire army. So the king didn't even hesitate to pull his troops back from the border and shut down anyone who tried to argue. This clown did whatever the king wanted, and 2 years ago, he was sent to crush an invading empire and take back their stolen land by force. King Albert says they need to lay low and build power instead of wasting cash on a massive army. But Cloud warns that the enemy is already plotting to take back land that was never even his in the first place. Albert knew that King was super greedy, so he did everything in his power to stay off his radar. Cloud was totally on board with the king about the war, but they couldn't just sit around and wait for the enemy to strike. The Gallian Empire's young ruler was obsessed with taking over everything, and even Claude couldn't get close to him because he was protected by 5 elite bodyguards. Since every one of them is just as strong as he is, Cloud plays it cool and lets the king of Gallia move his troops to the front so he can strike the second the emperor's guard shows up. He's gonna keep picking them off from the front until their numbers just start disappearing. This is going to be a long, brutal grind. But it's the only move they've got, and Claude can tell King Albert just wants them to give up fast so nobody else has to suffer. Nothing changes until the Gallic Empire gets a new emperor, so Roy is stuck being the sword saint and great sage until they find someone to take over. Roy got home totally wiped out, and since he had to meet the Lutetian king as the great sage tomorrow, he decided to grab a quick nap before dinner and Reena's arrival. A bit later, Roy hears a knock and opens the door thinking it's Reena, but he's in for a massive shock. The visitor was actually Yukina Crawford, and she walked right into his room to call out for him. All because he decided to ditch his classes. Roy asks why she's in his room, and she tells him their practice fight earlier just felt totally off. Mid-fight, she realized Roy knew all her weak points, which totally reminded her of when her grandma, the legendary first sword sink, used to train her. Roy asked why she'd even compare him to someone that strong, but Yukina wasn't buying it after seeing his muscles and the way Rafasad was staring him down, so Roy accidentally spotted a huge opening because she was being way too aggressive, but she just screamed at him to stop playing dumb and admit he'd already seen through her trick. Roy realized she caught him and was totally stuck between acting natural or panicking, right when his sister Reena showed up to call him for dinner. Turns out her brother was actually getting pushed around by some girl. Yukina acts all casual when she sees Reena, who just fakes a smile and asks if she's been getting close to her brother. Yukina asks for a private chat, but Roy can't help but notice how awkward she's being, and Reena immediately shuts it down by pushing her away to keep her sibling. That's why she needs to get strong ASAP, so she went and asked Roy for some help. Ever since he became the Sword Saint, nobody has even tried to take his spot, so he's actually hyped to see how much Yukina craves that power. He's not going to train her because she's just not ready yet, so he tells her to figure out her own weaknesses, watch him from the sidelines, and most importantly, stop dragging him out of bed every morning. The next morning, Yukina is totally stoked about his rules and promises to follow them. But once she's gone, Reena gets super annoyed that her brother is taking on more work. He tells her it's actually a win since Yukina won't be bugging them every day. though he's still confused why a freshman is in such a massive rush. Roy transforms into a legendary sage named Eclipse to see what's going on, and after the knights beg for help, he heads to the port because he'd usually let the soldiers handle a normal beast. But this thing is way too powerful. This is the legendary Kraken, but Eclipse dodges its strikes like it's nothing, and moves in before the beast can even land another hit. Eclipse almost threw hands, but he quickly dodged and flew back because he had to keep up his cool sage image for the crowd, and a master like him only fights with a sword. He raised his hand and shouted a legendary spell from the ancient books that only someone with insane magic power could ever pull off. He unleashed his power and summoned a massive thunder spear to take down that legendary beast. Its whole body burst into flames, and just like that, it totally wiped out the bad luck. Everyone is losing it over this insane ancient magic they've never seen before, and word is totally killing it as the legendary sage Eclipse while keeping his secret hidden. He was grinning, but he knew he had to find someone to take over his job so he could finally be free. He wanted a person as hyped as Yukina, who dreamed of becoming a swordmaster. Everywhere Roy goes at school, Yukina is right on his heels, even in the cafeteria, and when he begs her to stop following him and waking him up, she just claims it's observation practice because she needs to watch his every move. She thinks masters are built different even when doing normal stuff, so when Roy asked why she kept stalking and staring at him, she just said she was curious. Roy is totally trapped and there's just no way he's getting out of this one. Roy couldn't get a wink of sleep with her staring at him, but Yukina thought he was out cold and even filmed him. When he asked if she'd learned anything, she said she needed more time, and later she literally popped up in his room after school just because she wanted to watch him every single second. Roy tried to tell her he wasn't doing some secret training and was actually just being lazy, so Yukina sat down to read, and when Roy asked about the book she's always got with, Roy asks if her book told her to stay with a lazy dude, but she says she's just ready for a challenge. Then she starts talking about her grandma, a legendary sword saint who was, "Grandma is the one person you can totally trust to save the day, and she'll do whatever it takes to be that hero." Roy told her that being third place was already a huge win, and she should just focus on the basics, but Yukina screamed that they didn't have a single second to waste. She yelled so loud that Roy was totally caught off guard. He stood up and noticed she was totally frozen in place, so he asked her what was going on. She just snapped back that it was none of his business. She's heading out for the day, but the way she walks away leaves Roy completely shook. Maybe she messed up her words, because 3 days later Yukina was back to following Roy like usual. And when he asked when she'd finally stop, she just told him he was being mean. Before she can even say a word, this fancy-looking guy walks up to Roy to confirm his identity, and after Roy gives him the okay, the dude introduces himself as Tim Townsend. They're basically forced to get married just so they can raise the next person to carry the sword. Yukina was fuming and reminded Tim he promised her freedom at the academy, but Tim had been planning to control her from day one, telling her that as his future wife, she needed to. Roy thinks it's a joke that this guy acts so superior when he's only ranked 6th, and since this forced engagement would ban Yukina from ever using a sword again, Roy realizes Tim is just a jealous creep who wants to keep her trapped. He was in a huge rush, but he had to warn her that the Sword Saint title is only for real masters, and he's seen way too many people give up because they weren't good enough. Yukina thinks people hype up Sword Saints way too much, especially since she watched her grandma and realized they aren't just born legends. They have to grind every single day to get that powerful, and she's positive the current Sword Saint only reached the top because he worked his tail off and never gave up. With her insane willpower, she's definitely going to outshine the Sword Saint and save her kingdom as a legendary swordswoman. Roy was totally sold on her words and jumped straight into training, which really shocked Yukina since he was the one taking the lead, and even though he played it cool saying he was just helping, she was totally down for the training, and Yukina even begged to go again tomorrow, but Roy shut her down because he was hanging with Reena, so Yukina just decided to tag along too. Tim spotted them from the shadows and was totally fuming with jealousy toward the former noble. So when his friends mentioned Roy's genius sister Reena, he decided to target her first to settle. The next day, Reena's super annoyed and asks Roy why they aren't alone, but Yukina just tells her to ignore her. Reena's still frustrated until she notices Yukina is wearing her school uniform on a day off, only to find out she doesn't even own normal clothes because she couldn't care less about fashion. With that settled, they finally kicked off their day, and Reena started browsing through some cool books until she finally pulled one out. Roy finally showed her the new episode she'd been dying to see, which featured a simplified version of Reena's legendary spell, and while Yukina was totally caught off guard by her excitement, Reena was stuck in one tiny room dreaming of the fall colors, so Roy brought her leaves from every season and painted pictures just to see her smile, and seeing her happy made him promise. Rain's totally into reading and painting now, and while Yukina thinks he's a great brother, she finally stops calling Roy by his formal title since they're already basically besties. Yukina admits she's never actually had friends, so she has no clue how she's even supposed to act around him. Roy remembered she's always sitting by herself, and even though she thought he was making fun of her, he promised he wasn't being a jerk. He super nicely asked her to just call him by his name, and Yukina finally worked up the nerve to do it. He told them to just call him Roy like a real friend, and honestly, he was totally hyped about it. Yukina was super friendly and you guys were already on a first-name basis, so when Reena asked you both to lug around a massive stack of books, she felt bad for making Yukina do. Yukina was sure she'd memorized everything, and offered it as an apology for ruining the day. So when Reena's brother said it was a rare chance to see a master swords, Roy was stoked to see Yukina trust Reena with a secret family book. But when he came back from paying, Reena had vanished, and just as Yukina said she was in the next room, they heard her screaming for someone to let her go. Roy and Yukina realized the creep was actually Tim, who was grabbing Reena's hand and demanding she help him since he was handling her brother. But Reena just roasted him for only picking on people when they're all alone. He couldn't handle the teasing, so he shoved Reena and yelled that she was just as rude as her brother. Yukina rushed over to help Reena up, and Tim asks if he actually has to apologize to the dead noble's sister, which makes Yukina lose it. But right as she tries to force him, he points out that fighting at school is against the rules and they could. I chucked their academy badge at them during the duel, but Tim knew Yukina wouldn't risk the trouble, especially since she's fated to never go against him as his fiend. Right then, their school emblem slammed down right in front of Tim, and while Reena looked pretty annoyed, the other two were totally blown away because the person who threw it was... Roy's the only one stepping up, and he's totally ignoring Yukina just to pick a fight with Tim Senpai instead. In no time, the whole school was buzzing with rumors about the massive duel that was about to go down. No one believed Raven could actually take down the 6th-ranked Tim, but Yukina told Roy the hype was massive with crowds from both countries showing up. And Roy figured Tim was so cocky he'd already called his parents to brag about a win he hadn't even earned yet. Back in his room, Roy is busy plotting how to take Tim down in secret when his dad walks in, and Roy actually asks him for some help. Linus already heard about the duel and was pretty shocked because he thought Roy was just trying to bully a powerful noble into quitting school. But he soon realizes Roy has a totally different reason for the fight. Linus heard about Yukina and hyped Roy up for snagging such a total babe, thinking he did it all for Reena. But Roy actually did it for Yukina because Linus asks what the big deal is, and Roy explains that Yukion has a heavenly wolf eye that'll blow his cover if he fights like a scrub. Linus thinks he can just chop super fast to hide it, but Roy says that's even worse because if even a magical eye can't see him move, everyone will know he's way too strong. Linus thought it was game over, but Roy begged him to use his genius brain to save them, so Linus felt the heat and finally cooked up one last desperate plan for his son. He told Roy he could grab a totally different weapon from the book to clutch the win. He showed it to Roy, who was totally not impressed, but Linus bragged that his skills could make the impossible happen. Roy just had to wait for the signal during the match, because if this worked out, they were going to be swimming in cash, and honestly, he was way more hyped for the duel than Roy was, so when the big day finally came, Roy walked into a massive crowd that was only there to see him fight. It's fight time, and the ref lays down the law. If you get tossed out, knocked cold, or give up, you lose. And while Tim and Roy are both down, he's just trying to win enough cash to buy Reena a ton of books without overdoing it. But Tim warns him he's about to get totally humiliated. Roy just spoke up and said he's actually totally down with the rules of this fight. Tim instantly fired up his ultimate move, the Thunder of the Townsend Kingdom, which turns a regular sword into a magical powerhouse, while Roy actually chose a weaker buff for his own blade as Tim charged straight in. Roy leaps back to dodge, knowing a fancy sword doesn't mean Tim's won yet. And even though Tim tries to catch him mid-air, Roy barely stops himself from falling. Tom cranked up the pressure and asked Roy how much longer he could take it, but Roy just stayed silent and turned away from the center. Tim went in for the kill as their blades clashed, but Roy barely managed to escape. Tim was getting super frustrated that Roy was just playing defense and demanded he actually start fighting back. But Roy realized everything was going exactly how Father wanted, and started wondering what the big boss had planned next. Now he just has to follow his dad's final wish to see what the world's best strategist, Gray Fox, can really do. Tim's dad, Duke Townsend, was totally confused why his son was wasting time fighting some 6th-ranked noble, especially since Tim wasn't even close to Yuki's level, and Yuki was. Tim started trash-talking Roy for just playing defense and being scared to lose, but Roy fired back, telling him to just finish the fight if he was so confident, or else it looked like Tim was actually worried Roy might win. Roy even thanked him for the inspiring thought, But Tim definitely wasn't planning on letting that happen. Tim started throwing these massive horizontal swings, but Roy was just dancing around them. And while Tim barked at him to give up, Roy could see right through him because Tim was used to winning too easily. Right then, the lawyer Linus Royce Feather walked up to Duke Townsend with his son Liam, who's a big-shot assistant for the Foreign Affairs Minister. Liam gave a super smooth greeting, but Reena was totally shocked to see her big brother there and wondered what he was even doing with the Duke. Liam says he's just there to watch the showdown and keep the peace, but he's totally pulling for his brother Roy, and Reena is hyped that they're both on the same side. Linus remembers seeing Yukina hanging out with Duke Townsend, and after she says hi, the Duke actually apologizes for his son's behavior. But Linus says it's all good since Albius is a kingdom of warriors that totally respects a woman who can hold her own with a sword in Berlin. Duke Townsend was totally fuming, calling Linus's son a joke for trying to fight his kid who's ranked 6th in the whole academy. But Linus fired back that his son, it wouldn't make any sense for a pro-strategist like Linus to mess up. And since he says this duel is for his son, he's going all in because Tim never picks a... He's so hyped that he actually bets cash on Roy, which just makes Duke Townsend laugh and brag that his son is definitely winning. Reena and Liam try to get their dad to chill out, but Linus tells them to stay out of it. He bets his entire gold mine, so Duke Townsend steps up with 5 carts of gold, but Linus just laughs, saying that tiny bet proves the Duke doesn't even think his son can win, which makes Townsend snap and bet 15 carts instead while forcing all the nobles to witness it so nobody can back out. Linus checked to see if everyone caught that, and honestly, it gave Duke Townsend a major bad vibe. He still thinks a noble who lost his rank can't even put up a fight, so now everything comes down to who wins this showdown. Roy was totally faking his struggle, but Tin was actually hitting his limit as the fight completely drained him. He couldn't figure out how Roy was still on his feet, but then Roy looked him right in the eye and told him he was winning this fight no matter what. Tim's going all in with the Townsend family's secret weapon, the Thunder Cherry, and while his dad Duke knows it's over, Yukina watches Tim's power go totally off the charts as he sends Roy flying out of the ring with just one massive hit. Tim yelled that he'd end this fight in one hit, and Roy was totally ready to clash and finish things right there. Tim hated the Leave-All family because they were so stuck. He trashed them as failed nobles hiding behind a girl, but as he tried to put Roy in his place, something inside Roy finally clicked like all his doubts were gone. He suddenly flashes back to when he was just a kid. He remembers begging his mom to show him her secret sword move. She told him he wasn't ready because the move literally turns your injuries. She explains it's a sword style meant to protect the family, and Roy finally realizes she kept it from him back then just to keep him safe from harm. He's basically putting his life on the line to save everyone, and since he's finally a sword saint, he knows he can handle the power without getting hurt, so he fires. Linus signals him to end the match right now, and with fire in his eyes, Roy looks at Yukina, ready to destroy Tim Townsend for being a jerk to her and insulting his family. Roy charged forward, shouting that Tim was finally going to pay for everything, and even though he held back, he slammed his sword right into Tim's gut. Roy sends 10 flying with a massive hit and demands he apologize to his loved ones for every single word he said. 10 was standing in the crowd right next to his dad just as Roy finished the fight and took the win. Linus hyped up Roy for the big win since it keeps their family safe, and he realized Roy is finally a total beast they can actually count on. Yukina saw the whole thing and swore she'd be the one to take him down later, while Roy J. He took her challenge the second she was ready, making you just want him to come back from that arena safe and happy. Reena looked super worried when she saw him, but Roy just bragged about taking 6th place and asked if she was impressed. Right then, she pulls him into a hug and admits she was actually super worried about him. She was terrified he'd vanish just like their mom did, but she's so relieved he actually won and is safe, and Roy promised her he'd be fine while thanking her for looking out for him. Later on, Liam went to grill his dad about that secret sword fragment, totally shocked that his mom had actually left it behind. Linus told him he wasn't built for this because Roy is the swordmaster while Lion is the big-brain strategist. Everyone has their own thing they're good at. And you. Roy knows Liam is being super calculated, so Liam apologizes and says he's just hyped as a brother and a citizen, because Roy finally crushed a noble from the kingdom of Albeos. He's going all out to fix up their house and totally change how everyone sees their dad just to save the family. Roy was totally ready to back his brother up, and while Liam was grateful, he told Roy it was time to actually start taking school seriously. Suddenly, Liam gets word that Halea's massive army of 100,000 soldiers is storming the border of Aldeo. Liam is freaking out because they only have one. The swarm turned into a giant cloud and reached the border, but the Sword Saint was bored out of his mind and totally wrecked the army. Albius is the land of swords and Lutetia is the land of magic, where they turn people into super soldiers worth 1,000 men. while the Gallic Empire just tries to win with massive armies. They're rocking heavy magic armor and the most high-tech gear, making them totally invincible. Cloud suddenly drops right into the middle of the army and wipes out dozens of guys with a single swing, sending everyone into a total panic because they actually thought they stood a chance if they teamed up. The Sword Saint lunged straight for the captain to show he wasn't messing around, and while the army tried to bury him in magic rifle fire, Cloud just took them all out one by one. He headed straight for their base and ran into General Egon, who was dying to duel the White Sword, but Cloud was in a massive rush and told him they'd settle it with just... The general was actually just stalling so everyone could get away, and when Cloud asked why he'd throw his life away, Egon just said it was the king's orders, as they both grabbed their swords, and the whole vibe shifted. Egon swings first, but Cloud dodges in a flash and backs up to launch his own attack. Before Egon even knew what hit him, Cloud Sword drove his blade straight through his armor to prove he was on a whole different level. But this was all part of Egon's plan to sacrifice himself from the very start. He showed up with bombs strapped to his chest, ready to die just to take the Sword Saint out with him. He pulled the trigger, but nothing happened because Cloud was way ahead of him and had already disabled the bombs. This was officially the end for Egon as he took his very last breath. He prayed for the Gallia Empire to stay on top, and after Cloud finally ended the war, he stood in the pouring rain wondering how long this peace would even last. When Roy gets back home, Reena confronts him about why he's been so disappointed in her lately, but he just asks where that's even coming from. She teased him about missing those wake-up calls from pretty girls, but Roy said he'd choose sleep over looks any day, and since she totally fell for it, they both headed off to school. Roy shows up at school and runs into Yuki, who says it's been way too long, and even though he just finished soloing a massive army of 100,000 like it was nothing, he's somehow totally shaking just talking to this one girl. They were heading to class, but Yukina asked for a quick practice because she had something cool to show him, and Roy was totally down to check out the video. Check it out, Yukina just showed off her insane new cursed sword move, Ice Flower. Roy was definitely feeling the chill from her move, but acted like he was totally fine, and right as they started training, she told him to go all out while he just asked her to go easy on him. She stepped up and made the first move, but this time Yuki was way more precise and smooth, looking like she's been training like crazy lately. He personally trapped us by using her signature way of attacking, but this time she's just standing there totally silent, and he's left wondering what's going on with her weird fighting style. He asks if she's finally getting some rest, but she just leaves him guessing. Roy decided to turn up the heat and suddenly lunged at Yuki Nakadema, forcing him to drop his sword. Roy told her he was super hyped about her wins, and while she was loving the praise, he pointed out that her defense was looking way stronger lately. She's not picking just one, she wants to keep grinding on both of them together. Later, while they were chilling, Roy gave her major props for keeping up with her workouts. Then he asked her straight up what was really going down back at home. Yukina was low-key worried that the duel with Tim changed her whole life. But after Roy admitted he'd been thinking about it too, she realized that since her engagement was finally over, she was totally free to finish school and become a legendary sword saint just like her grandma. She owed it all to Roy because he was the one who actually pulled it off. When he stepped up to the Elder's challenge just to help her, she saw him in a whole new light and promised she'd never give up. Roy felt like giving them any props would just be way too much. Then she straight up asked him to have her back from now on. Roy nods at her, but when she keeps pushing him to explain his fire trick, he gets all flustered and tells her it's a secret technique he's not allowed to share. Everyone called Roy a total gatekeeper for keeping the good stuff to himself. And while he was hyped she was finally living her best life, his own day-to-day was honestly pretty mid. Now people are keeping a close eye on him because they're worried Roy level might wreck their big plans, and they have to keep everything under control for their majesty. Next, Sutton Roy meets the stunning Atsanie, a fire magic genius and total troublemaker who's been dying to ask him on a date ever since she heard about his epic duel. Let's rewind a bit to when Reena was still training to get her crazy magic under control, and she kept that perfect mystery going to keep everyone totally stunned. Everyone in the gym was totally shocked, and now they all see her as the second strongest person in the whole school. Teachers thought she was a total star and everyone loved her smile, but a Halley Empire spy was actually stalking her from the shadows, and just as he started taking notes, Roy totally busted him. He shut her up to keep things quiet, and even though she tried to blast him with magic, Roy shut it down fast and took out the spy for good. He also dropped a massive magic circle to take out the rest of the spies, and after seeing Roy use it, they were totally convinced he was some kind of legendary sage. Too bad for them, because they aren't making it out of this alive. Once the mess was cleared, Roy searched their gear and realized these students were actually imposters who snuck into the academy by pretending to be merchants. If there are more spies like that, we're in huge trouble because it means the Empire's rats are already perfectly blended in with the crowd. Roy used his puppet magic to make a bunch of clones and sent them all out at once to gather intel from everywhere. Roy remembers how 5 years ago, Reena totally crushed the Empire's army and proved she was going to be a massive problem for them. The Empire was hunting for Reno's power because they realized the legendary Star Spirit Apostles were actually real, and these guys had insane magic in their veins that gave them infinite strength. Turns out those apostles were Roy and his sister, who were just discovered by 2 people trying to figure out why the Empire's whole army vanished. Roy shut them down because he didn't want his sister Reena feeling the pressure, so he decided to handle both roles himself, which totally blew their minds since being a swordsman and a great. She decided to give it a shot and started training Roy in magic and sword fighting, and even though he put in some serious blood and sweat, it turns out they both totally underestimated just how crazy these Star Spirit Apostles really were. Roy accidentally leveled up into both a sword synchronizer and a great sage with infinite magic, and since Reena has no clue how special she is, they definitely can't just hand her over to the Empire. Roy just touched down at his Eclipse Identity estate in the Lutetia Empire for some business, even though he really wanted to stay at the academy a bit longer. He actually tried to talk his dad, Linus, into letting him drop out, but his old man wasn't having it, leaving Roy wishing he could just quit school to make his life way easier. Suddenly, the Master of Wind Magic appeared. He's the 7th Celestial Mage and one of the rare few who knows exactly who Roy is. Roy asked why they needed him to show up in such a huge hurry. Vila shot back that he was just as busy, since Valura was the top spy in the land who could sneak into any empire, and knowing Vila was the only guy working harder than him, they finally got down to the real reason for the call. He told Roy the Empire is planning their biggest move yet, and while Valor isn't sure when it starts, the Royal Imperial Guard is joining in, so you know it's going to be huge. Roy realized the Gallic Emperor was basically starving for a big win right now. Valor explained that the 100,000 soldiers were actually just a scouting party, and even though Roy laughed it off, Valor warned him they're finally going all. Wyler was happy to hear it, but he knew the Gallic Empire wasn't stupid, and since Eclipse couldn't win with just raw power, he realized there had to be a secret plan behind the whole mission. The message is in a secret code he just picked up, and since he hasn't cracked it yet, it looks like only the top-ranking members can actually read it. They're probably... Eclipse made sure he was ready for anything, so Valor told him to stay sharp like a pro. Then Valor went to hunt for info while leaving Eclipse to handle the big fight outside before he took off. Wyler asked if Eclipse wanted to take on a student, and even though Eclipse claimed he was too busy, Wyler insisted he'd be a great teacher, and questioned if that was the real reason. Valor agreed to every single thing Eclipse wanted just to make sure the kingdom of Lutetia stayed safe. Valor already had someone in mind for the spot, but he told Eclipse to hit him up if he ever changed his mind. Eclipse put Valor in charge of getting to know that new student. He headed back to the academy to chill on the grass and enjoy the vibes, and this time Yukina actually let him be, but after talking to Valor, he knew his schedule was about to get super packed. Roy just wanted to chill on the ground for a few more minutes, soaking in the fresh air and staring up at that bright blue sky. Out of nowhere, a massive water bubble comes flying at him, so Roy quickly shields his drawing from the splash, having absolutely no clue what just happened. Suddenly, a gorgeous girl pops out of the water, admits she totally messed up again, and says she's sorry. Go ahead and introduce yourself as Sonia Annette from the Magical Arts Department. Out of nowhere, the super pretty Annette just straight up asked him out on a date. She was seriously gorgeous, and her figure just made her look even better. Roy turned around and offered her his handkerchief. She thought a famous guy like him would be super kind. But then, out of nowhere, she asks him to train, but Roy remembers magic is strictly banned at the academy because she once lost control and blew up half the building. Annette spotted the drawing in his hand and called it special, which totally confused Roy since he knows his art skills are actually trash. She decided to help him out and fix his drawing for him. She pointed out exactly how she leveled up his drawing, and it finally clicked for Roy since she'd been practicing this stuff since she was a kid, and for now, she finally had a piece of paper to use. She backed off, planning to catch him at the cafeteria while selling her croquettes. But Annette Saroy never actually goes there since she always brings her own lunch from home. Roy was just about to go eat in peace, but then Annette stopped him and begged him to buy the last 2 croquettes so she could finally finish her work. So our guy finally grabbed them just to help her out. She thanked him for the help, but when she asked for a croquette during their walk, Roy shut her down because he was saving it for dinner. She started making a huge scene for everyone to see, and since she helped Roy get some cash yesterday, he finally caved and bought her a free croquette that she totally devoured. Roy straight up asks her why she's even selling croquettes in the first place. She says she has to do this because her family is totally broke, even though they were once famous fire magic masters in the Lutetia Empire. Everything started falling apart 12 years ago when her grandpa died. She hit rock bottom and almost sold her body to survive, but then a shady guy spotted her talent and used government backing to get her into the academy, making her so relieved that her family was finally going to be okay. Roy suspected this sketchy guy was Vior, and that Annette was the apprentice he'd mentioned. Annette explained her school funding only covers tuition, so she's still out here hustling for extra. She said she actually saw the Great Sage's magic once, and it totally blew everyone away. She wants her fire magic to blow everyone away, and if she can inspire even one kid, she'll be totally happy. But since she can't control her magic, she's been causing some major chaos for the whole academy. That's why magic is totally banned at the academy, because right now she can only spark some messy little flames, and even if she trains in secret, she's never going to catch up to the rest of the class. So for now, her dreams of becoming a wizard are totally on hold. Roy caught that tiny look of sadness on her face. The next day, Roy's sister woke him up for lunch with food and water all ready before she headed to school. And he couldn't stop thinking about that awesome dream he just had about the day everything first started. He pushed himself to become a legendary swordsman and sage just to keep his sister safe. And Annette feels that same duty to protect her family. But everything changes when Roy realizes his father was behind. Forget being a sword saint or a sage, because it's finally time to go Roy level and settle the score once and for all. Back at school, he spots the net appearing in every single puddle on the ground, and she totally catches on. She asked if he was trying to distract her, and when Roy wondered how she even caught him, she just said she's super sharp and notices everything. Roy tosses her a towel, and while Annette's worried he thinks she's a total joke for shielding against her own water magic, she's really just trying to crush her fear of failing, and Roy can tell exactly what she's up to. No wonder she broke down right there in her seat after Roy told her that getting stronger has to be painful, because she definitely didn't see it that way. Roy knew she had insane magic and talent, but since she was still a total rookie, he told her to quit pouting and follow him to a special spot. He leads her by the hand, thinking about the hell she went through to become a mage. But her power is so crazy it might actually swallow her whole. He's sure the academy won. Roy leads her to this mysterious place glowing with crazy magic, and when he tells her to blast a tree with her powers, she's terrified of burning it down. But Roy promises he's got everything under control if things get wild. She blasted a giant fireball right at him, but she was honestly terrified of what was about to happen. Roy told her to look closer, and she was shocked to see the trees literally sucking up the magic from the fireball. He explained that they were standing in a massive magic hotspot called a starve. Roy told her he just stumbled onto this spot while looking for a view, and since she could finally go wild with her magic here, he asked for drawing lessons as payment because he knew free stuff always comes with a catch. And she gave him a huge thanks for helping her out so much. But he wasn't done talking yet, and he dropped a total bombshell. His own father was the one who killed Anne's grandfather. Annette stays totally chill and says she already knew, because her grandpa chose to go on that mission himself, so blaming anyone else would just be disrespectful to his memory, and Roy totally gets it. She was actually super happy to see him stressing out over her. But now she's doing totally fine, all thanks to him. She was totally going to become a top 10 witch and never stop thanking Royce. And since Roy knew she was telling the truth, everything went exactly how Valor planned. Meanwhile, Valor is going all out torturing Abraham to get the secret code, but Abraham won't say a single word. He tells Valor to just kill him already, while Valor tries to guilt-trip him about his wife just to get him to explain the message. And just like that, being so valuable is exactly what ended up getting him killed. Valor had no clue where to go next until Abraham's wife called out to him, which was exactly what he was secretly hoping for. He went to deal with her so he wouldn't get caught, but then he remembered Eclipse's warning to leave civilians alone. Wyler backed off and bolted out of there in a flash, since he definitely didn't want a powerful sage on his bad side. Everything rests on the code breakers now, and after a few days, Valor gets a mysterious hooded guy to finally crack the letter. When the guy asks how he got such a high, they were seriously going to sacrifice 400,000 people just to take over the Grand Duchy, the heart of the whole alliance, and Whaler was losing it because Roy lived there. He realized they used the Kraken's chaos as a cover to sneak in, and he was totally shocked that the Gallian Empire could actually control monsters. They walked right into the Empire's trap, so he had to rush and tell the Great Sage while Roy just chilled under a tree. Back at school, Yukina explained the massive beef between the swordsmen and wizards, which Roy totally got since their kingdoms were old enemies who still didn't trust their alliance. But then she shocked him by mentioning, she even knows that the training ground is the secret spot where all the Starvanes gather together. She found out while grabbing tea and snacks with Annette, and now she realizes this place is so rare that it's almost impossible to find in any history books. Roy realized she probably read about this place in the library, so finding the exit was going to be a total breeze. He wouldn't explain a thing and just said the answers were in some super rare book back at his house. Yukina was totally down and pushed for a match right then. But since Roy was busy, she teased him into showing her some training spots instead, and he just couldn't say no when she acted like that. They were just starting to train in the backyard when Annette came sprinting over, yelling that a super rare phantom beast had just broken out of the academy. There's a massive reward for finding it that gets Yukina super hyped, but Roy thinks it's a total drag and just tells Annette good luck, causing her to stop dead in her tracks. She told them straight up that she wanted that award way more than anything. Roy totally saw this coming, so instead of hunting through the whole school, they decided to bait the monster right to them, and Yukina knew exactly how to pull it off. Did she seriously figure out the beast's favorite food, grab a massive stash and just hang out in the dining hall waiting for it to show up? Roy asks why Annette is snacking on their bait. She says she's just trying to look natural, and suddenly some creepy black smoke starts crawling past their legs. This creepy ghost monster pops out of nowhere and tries to snatch its favorite thing from the movie. Roy lunged for the fruit, but that beast was way too fast for him. Someone managed to slip away, and since food just ruined their outfits, Yukina decided they both needed to go change right now. Roy ditches the group to hunt the monster solo, figuring it's nearby grabbing a snack, so he follows the trail for a few minutes until it leads him straight into a mysterious room. That was the exact spot where Yukina and Annette were changing, and it totally caught Roy by surprise. Annette yelled at Roy to stop being a creep, but he warned her a monster was close, and once she heard a massive roar, she started hunting for it everywhere. She was about to bolt after them, but Yukina had to remind her to actually put some clothes on first. While they were distracted, another student found the beast first, and she totally missed out on that big cash reward. Once Roy finally escaped, he rushed home and swapped himself out for a puppet. He transformed into the legendary sage Eclipse and rushed to Valor to see why he'd been summoned. But he was shocked to find Valor totally beat up from a failed mission. When Eclipse asked how a pro like him got hurt, Valor explained he was caught trying to bust through the Gallian Empire's defenses to crack their secret code. Gaul is sending 400,000 soldiers to invade Albios and Lutetia, but their real target is the Grand Duchy, and when Roy asks why, he finds out they're hitting the weakest link to blow up the whole alliance. Baylor was down to help Eclipse, but the Gallia Empire's army was just way too massive for him to handle, and since Eclipse didn't think the king would let him fight alone, the Kingdom of Albios decided to send their strongest knights to back up the Holy Sword. Eclipse decided to solo the entire army, while the Sword Saints stayed back to guard the city. And since Roy knew Eclipse was a beast at wiping out crowds, he kept the plan a secret from the king and decided to just handle things his own way. Valor was totally freaked out by this massive crisis, but Eclipse explained they didn't have time to wait for the king, so he sent Valor to the Kingdom of Albios to share the plan while he prepared to take on 400,000 enemies all by himself like a true legendary sage. He handed the job to Eclipse, told the king the plan, and let Eclipse get straight to work on some shady schemes to fix the mess. He rushed back to his room at the academy to piece everything together, knowing that if the Grand Duchy was the target, the school would be the first place hit. But just as he figured Roy had, she says the students have completely lost hope, and now they're fighting over whether to run away or stay and scrap. Roy realizes the Gallic Empire planned this chaos all along, so he knows it. The school announced they were building a barricade, but the seniors were all missing, and Roy knew they wouldn't have helped anyway as he packed his bags and told Reena they had to warn their dad. Dad decided it'd be way faster to deliver the message himself instead of waiting for a messenger from the capital. Reena pointed out that if they both bailed now, it would look like they're... Rin says she's staying behind for the family this time, but Roy is super worried because even though she's a total beast in a fight, he hates leaving her in such a dangerous... Roy is so terrified of Reena getting hurt that he might ignore her wishes just to protect her, because she's the most important person in his world, and he'd be totally lost if anything happened to her. Roy was ready to go totally insane and throw everything away just to keep her safe, but Reena managed to snap him back to reality. She told him to just trust her because she's ready to speak up and protect the family, and she'll own whatever happens next. She says sorry and takes off, but Yukina heard everything from outside and jokes that Roy's little sister is just going through a total rebellious phase. Roy was totally tripped out because he didn't even see her slip away, and then Yukina hit him with the, "You're such a sweet brother" line. Roy asks if she'll stay in his well, but she says she has to honor the Three-Nation Pact to protect her home. Roy thinks that's noble, but he tells she's not backing down just because her enemy is strong, because her pride as a future master swordswoman won't let her quit. Roy saw she was dead serious, and since she promised to keep Reena safe with Yukino, he told her he was going to bring the father back to lead everyone, but first he had to make sure she wasn't going to give up. She talks big about representing her kingdom and protecting this spot to the very end, But then we realize her sword is actually the one talking. She flashes a smile and says she's still gonna be a warrior, so Roy decides to let her do her thing as long as she doesn't push herself too hard. Roy was just about to head out, but Yukina stopped him to ask if he was actually coming back to see you. Roy swears right then and there that he'll protect every single person and thing Yukina cares about. She knew he'd be back for sure, and Yukina was totally right because Roy warped straight onto the battlefield a moment later. He's staring down a massive army of 400,000 people, and he knows he can't afford to hold back anymore. The Gallic Empire's army swarmed out and started invading every single place they could find. They raided every tiny village in their path and totally crushed the peaceful people of Egan, who didn't even have a way to fight back. Eclipse watched the massacre and bolted toward the fight, but reaching a crowd of 400,000 was basically impossible, and he knew he couldn't get stuck here since this army was just a huge distraction. Eclipse pushed himself to the limit, using his void magic to wipe out as much as he possibly could. A few hours back, Linus had a talk with his dad and realized the Gallian Empire was totally going all out. But when he asked if Reena was still at the academy, his dad said, "Roy mentions how people usually get attached to where they live." Then Linus asks him if he's ever wondered why he's still being kept at the academy. Linus told him straight up that murder is always murder, whether it's war or peace. A lesson he learned 12 years ago when he used his head to stay human instead of becoming a beast, just as Roy was finishing up his new sword. He unleashed the spell, remembering his dad's words about how great it was that Roy finally had a real reason to fight. Roy claimed he was just fighting for his family, but Linus thought a tiny loan was a lame excuse, and that Roy's real job should be saving every single person in all 3 nations. We wanted Roy to check out the students from other countries so he'd finally see they aren't total strangers, but just regular people like him. Roy had to protect those happy days for everyone, not just himself, and he was ready to give his life to keep them safe. Now Roy had to end the war as the great dark sage Eclipse, and the only thing keeping him from being a total monster was his need to protect everyone. Lannis warned Roy that a machine without a point breaks fast, but the academy will clear his head and show him what's worth fighting for so he can choose to protect things for. Roy crafted a massive god-tier blade out of pure metal, and he's gonna let this loose on the entire Gallia Empire army. They don't even believe a monster that insane is actually real. Roy didn't waste any time and just straight up demolished them, and he wasted 0 time getting right back to work on the rest of them. The soldiers were totally freaked out and started backing away in a panic. Rory finally got what his dad meant. Taking out those soldiers felt like nothing, but the thought of the academy being in danger actually made him nervous. So he finished the fight and teleport. After taking care of the device, he shifted into Sword Sync Cloud and headed for the Albius battlefield on foot, since only top-tier sages can teleport, and he couldn't risk getting spotted by. He figured the sneak-in squad probably had no clue they'd already been totally wrecked. Roy needs to rush to the academy right now to handle those guys. Since the king cares about the alliance and trusts Roy's skills, he gave him the green light to move fast. Back at the academy, Yukina and Reena saw that only a few students were still standing, and Reena was just so relieved her friend was still there with her. She says her own pride and drive are what brought her there, but she promises she's not going anywhere. Yukina scanned the area, felt a bad vibe, and hopped down to warn Reena that things were about to get freezing. Yukina unleashed her magic sword, Ice Flower Burst, letting it rip all around her. Her ice blast hit home and revealed an invisible monster, leaving Reena and Yukina totally shocked to see Tarantizio, a beast she remembered from the books that acts like a snake and hides in thick smoke. Yukina tried to charge in and stop him, but an imperial soldier riding that beast blocked her path. She screamed for Annette to sound the alarm, and she did it instantly. Everyone. Yukina Das suddenly saw something smash through the barrier and head straight for the academy, realizing the Imperial army had them totally surrounded with long-range magic weapons. As the students started to freak out, March warns that if the enemy breaks through, the capital is toast, so they're the only ones left to save the whole country. Yukina's speech gets all the students totally hyped as the Imperial army saw Yukina charging and started blasting, but she froze their bullets with her ice scythe and totally wrecked a bunch of knights. She warned them not to sleep on Glass Rain Academy just because of their rank, and even as the soldiers kept taking shots at her, Yukina used her magic eyes to read their every move until Yukino finally caught her breath, but then the sirens started screaming again as 3 more Tarantizio monsters closed in on the academy, and she was totally freaking out because just one of those things was already a nightmare to deal with. The enemy's charging in and the students are barely holding on, but it's just not enough. Yukina realizes they're hitting every single entrance, and if these blasts keep coming, the magic shield is gonna shatter, leaving her totally stuck on what to do next. Right then, a massive fireball slams into the enemy camp and wrecks them. a curse cast by Annette herself as she summons Yukina to head straight for the academy. Annette wanted to stop the bombs and prove she wasn't dead weight, and she finally managed to get her powers under control. With these new powers, she can finally stop holding back and go all out. An imperial soldier starts running for his life as Annette blasts away, and she shouts that she's putting the Sonnier name back in the history books. A few imperial soldiers tried a sneaky ambush, so Yukina jumped into the brawl and told everyone to hold the line, and just as the students were starting to struggle, Tides finally showed up. Reena jumped into the fight with her binding magic, but she missed one soldier who was aiming right at Annette. Right on time, a massive magic blast wipes out the soldier, and everyone turns to see exactly who did it. The attacker was actually Royce's dad, Vainast Level, and he apologized to Reena for taking so long to get there. He said that now that he's finally here, they're gonna cause some serious trouble for those imperial armies and knights. Linus scanned the battlefield, already figuring out exactly how he was gonna take these guys down. He ordered the squad to get in position and start blasting magic bullets at the enemy. But Reena was busy staring at those imperial army rifles, wondering how her dad managed to get them. Linus told them to grab anything they could find, even the enemy's own weapons, to fight back for their country, which really got the students hyped, and Yukina felt totally relieved having the world's best strategist on their side. As Linus explained, they just needed to hold the line until reinforcements showed up to clinch the win. She froze up while the students were getting wrecked every second, and the enemy just kept sending in monsters to make the whole fight a total nightmare. Linus watched the students brawl, and he actually felt pretty bad for them. He rounded up all the young warriors and told them this wasn't a solo fight, so the swordsmen immediately started asking the mages to cover their backs. That tiny change completely flipped the script, and as the students started wrecking the knights, the Imperial commander watched from afar, totally shocked that these kids were such a problem, until a knight told him a baron was now running the whole academy. The leader knows Linus is the smartest strategist in the Three Kingdoms, so he's not taking any chances and orders his knights to bring out his magic armor, because he decided to step up and hit the front lines himself. Right then, a Halley Empire Special Unit fighter tried to jump in, but the commander told him to beat it and said he'd handle things alone, so the guy decided to hang back and see if he was actually for real. Linus recognized the enemy leader as the legendary hero of the Southern Front, while Bachstein and Bachstein shouted that they'd wreck anyone who didn't get out of their way immediately. Bachstein unleashed his explosive fire sword, instantly wiping out a bunch of students and blasting a massive hole right through the wall. He smashed through the wall and stormed into the academy, where Linus was already waiting to talk some trash, but Bachstein didn't waste a second and launched a direct attack. And then Yukina Crawford stepped in and totally blocked me. Bachstein was totally blown away by her speed and those troublemaking magic eyes, so he told Yukina to get back since he only cared about the guy behind her, but she just thanked him and made it clear she wasn't running away. She swung her ice blade, but Bechstein blocked it with his exploding sword, so Yukina kept spamming ice into the fire until it created a massive... She used a smokescreen to sneak up on Bachstein since her magic eyes could see right through it, but he somehow blocked her hits and finally spotted her. She's hitting her limit and realizes she can't use her magic sword and special eyes at the same time. So Bachstein decides to take out this rookie right now before she becomes a real threat. He was planning to take her out right along with Linus Leib. Right then, he felt something and did a total 180, saying his goodbyes to Yukino. He started backing off, and even though she teased him for running away, the stakes had completely changed. If he actually walked out, the whole academy was about to become a total bloodbath. Suddenly, a massive wolf monster and its pack smashed right through the walls, and it looked like a total bloodbath was about to go down. The academy is suddenly crawling with way too many monsters to count, and while Yukina and Linus are totally confused, Linus figures out a demon clan must be pulling the strings. Yukina can't believe it since that clan was supposed to be extinct, but Linus thinks the Gallia Empire brought them back and realizes that if they take out the leader, all these monsters will finally vanish. Yukina stayed behind to hold off the monsters and told Linus to go hunt down the demon, so he took off. He told her to watch her back and started hunting for that demon clan member. He saw the monsters were attacking other students too, so Linus stabbed the one on the girl and told her to get somewhere high fast. Just as he was about to get hit, Reena shielded her dad with wind magic and told him she'd handle the fight while he went to hunt down that demon. Linus was freaking out because that whirlwind only stops people, not monsters, so he told Reena to run, but she refused because she wanted to stay and fight for everyone too. The wolf monster smashed right through her whirlwind and was ready to tear her to shreds with its claws. Reena knew she couldn't lose here, because if she went down, those monsters were going straight for her dad and everyone else. There was no way she was going to let this happen no matter what. Rin blasted the monster with a huge wave of magic to buy some time, but she was totally wiped out after that, so Linus caught her in his arms. Just as the monster was about to strike again, Yukina jumped in at the last second to save their lives, but the wolf was way too strong and slammed her straight into a wall, leaving her seriously injured. Her left arm was totally useless from the pain, so she had to put everything into her right hand just to survive. She'd just taken a brutal hit, and even though her magic was barely pinning, before she could even move, 3 more wolf monsters swarmed her from all sides. Yukina refused to back down, so she gripped her sword and fought with everything she had to buy every second and protect her kingdom's land. Right then, a total miracle happened when the Sword Saint showed up out of nowhere and sliced the heads off those wolf monsters to save her life. Cloud, hurry up and apologize to Yukino for being late. He's finally here, so you just know everything's gonna be okay now. The demon boss ordered his monsters to attack, so the swordsman told Yukina to hang on tight as he leaped off the wall to stare down the enemy. Before his feet even hit the dirt, he'd already taken out a bunch of those monsters. Cloud kept charging ahead until he finally found the one behind the monsters, but the demon didn't even blink when he was caught. This guy introduced himself as Crawling from the demon tribe, and said he had his reasons for joining the Gallia Empire, but when Cloud asked what the demons were actually getting out of the deal, Crawling wouldn't say a word. He didn't care at all about the people suffering, but Cloud wasn't having it, so before he finished crawling off, he demanded to know how he stayed alive for thousands of years. Crawline just revealed he didn't actually die but was lost in time, and since nobody's scared of him anymore, he's grabbing his sword to personally bring back the nightmares. Cloud rushed Yukina off to a safe spot while King Lime chased them down with his ultimate masterpiece. Check out the Night Dragon Fafnir. Yukina was shocked that anyone could control a beast this powerful, but Cloud didn't care at all and charged at Crawlgul the second he saw it. He ripped it open and jammed his blade inside, making a badly hurt Crawlvine scream out a curse at him. The Dragon Knight unleashed a massive attack, but he somehow managed to smack it away with his sword. Cloud flashed back to the last time he used both hands on his sword while Crawlvian and Draggy jumped him at the same time. Cloud had to attack and block at the same time, but after dodging a huge swing, he realized the Dragon Knight's strength was on a whole different level. Just then, Backstain jumps into the fight, but Cloud grips his blade with both hands to hold them both off. Klo lands a clean hit and tells him to just give up, but Bachstein refuses to back down even with his very last breath. Cloud had no clue why the knights in the Gallic Empire were so brutal, but he was stuck fighting for his life against 2 absolute beasts all on his own. To make things even crazier, a bunch of Imperial soldiers jumped in and started blasting, catching Cloud totally off guard. Cloud's reflexes were on another level as he swatted away every attack, dodging bullets with perfect footwork while the soldiers actually thought they had a shot, even though the Sword Saint wasn't even sure if this guy could be hurt. Bachstein realized the king wanted the Sword Saint's head way more than the territory, so he ordered the entire army to swarm Cloud all at once and finally end his insane winning streak. Cloud didn't flinch no matter how many guys swarmed him, and even though they actually caught the spirits, it didn't help them one bit. With the list complete, Cloud decided to show off his demon sword as a final goodbye. That Cloud absolutely wrecked the enemy army, and while Bechstein was a little freaked out, he didn't feel any different and wondered if that holy swordsman's demon blade was finally losing its power. Then, out of nowhere, a massive shockwave hit everyone like the universe itself was starting to crack open. In just a few seconds, that Cloud totally wiped out the entire army in one single hit. Cloud knew his sword was a total beast, so he was always super careful with it. But his insane power had the bad guys freaking out and wondering who he really was, and whenever they asked about the White Swordsman, he just hit them back with more questions. While the Albius Kingdom guards were on the scene, Yukina was watching the whole fight go down with her insane magic eyes. He watched every single second, but since Cloud's fort was already done, he apologized and rushed off to report to the king. It all happened so fast that the academy students weren't even sure if they'd actually won, and Yukina was just standing there completely blown away. She was 100% sure the White Swordsman of St. Cloud used the exact same moves as Roy, proving they were the same guy. Roy and Valor got dragged to the Lutetia Kingdom where King Lucien totally ripped into them for asking the Sword Saint for help first, leaving Valor to look at Eclipsa and realize he seriously should have checked in with the king before anyone else. The Prime Minister and his star student Elange suddenly showed up to tell the king everything was fine, and since she's the king's niece, the student council president, and one of the legendary, one guy mentioned that the 6th-ranked sword demon actually lost to a regular student, which totally grabbed Roy's interest, and while the Prime Minister said they couldn't just ignore it, Valor realized he knew exactly who that student was. Ennis declared she's finally taking charge to fix the Academy's messy rankings, and then she started asking about this guy Roy Level, a low-tier noble who somehow crushed the 6th-ranked fighter, and even caught the attention of the legendary 3rd-ranked Yukina. She feels like she has to fix Roy for the Academy's sake, but she's honestly not sure she's in any shape to pull it off right now. A few days after the Empire attacked, he headed back to school where everyone was buzzing about the legendary Great Sage and the Holy Sword. Over in Albius, the Holy Sword was treated like... Roy mentioned it's super rare for her to invite him on a walk and noticed a new number on her uniform, which Yukina explained was a rank emblem from the student council. And even though Roy brought up the thank you letter she got from the king for saving the academy, she stayed humble and gave all the credit to her team. Roy totally made the right move by calling for backup. But then he noticed a creepy smile on her face as she talked about how lucky she was to see the Sword Saint fight in person. Roy, keep leading her while playing the part of Roy, the legendary Holy White Sword. Roy's jaw dropped, but Yukina told him not to sleep on her magic eye because she saw his secret torchlight move clear as day. Roy was totally stunned when Yukina admitted she never expected a legendary sword saint to look like a random traveling kid. And even though he joked that a failed noble like him couldn't be a master, she told him to stop lying and promised to keep his secret, leaving Roy speechless at her absolute faith when she claimed her eyes never make mistakes. She's realizing that training with the sword saint was the best move ever, and even Roy finally admitted he totally underestimated her. Yukina told him all about her big match tomorrow and asked him to come watch his students fight. Then later that night, Roy finally finished his eclipse patrols and made sure the academy's barrier was totally fixed. Suddenly, he saw a strange barrier around the arena and realized it was actually meant for protection, not to stop him. This was some top-tier magic that only a master could create, so he knew. He was totally shocked when he finally spotted a super cute girl. The girl and her dancers start moving perfectly under the moonlight, and it's super creepy because it looks like she's training for a fight, but it turns out she's just a noble. Suddenly, the girl sensed something and asked if anyone was there, but Roy didn't want rumors spreading about a fallen noble crossing the barrier, so he teleported away before she could even spot him. Back in his room, Roy wondered who could pull off a stunt so crazy even the teachers would struggle, and then he remembered the girl was a blonde. The next day at school, Roy sat with Annette, who was totally chilling and munching on snacks after getting a huge reward from the academy for stopping the invasion. She sent most of... Annette points out that Roy could easily be in the top 10 since he already crushed the number 6 ranker. But Roy knows that title just means way more work, and he'd rather avoid the headache. The 7th ranked challenger steps up to take her spot, and even though the match starts with a crazy burst of attacks, Yukina stays totally chill like she's got it all figured out. Roy thinks she might turn her blade into a magic ice sword, which would actually be a pretty fair limit for her. He kept hitting her with long-range wind magic to make his sword invisible, while Yukina leaped into the air to deliver a massive strike from above. The fight in midair was getting wild as she blocked those wind blasts, and then Yukina hit a sharp stance that Roy knew all too well. As she jammed her sword into the guy's side, Roy realized that move looked exactly like her victory pose. She gave Roy a wink to show she could copy his moves perfectly, and just as the next big mage fight was starting, the student council leaders Ennis and Yukina walked right past her. Roy heard the crowd going wild and asked if Ennis was really that famous, and Annette told him she's basically the Lutetia Empire's top idol, because she's got the looks and the insane skills to match. Roy saw his opponent NS was the 8th-ranked mage, but she was totally shocked that her beauty didn't seem to faze him at all. Roy made it clear he only cares about fighting tactics, which she thought was awesome, and now he's totally hyped for the duel. The second the match starts, Ennis's opponent blasts her with... The whole crowd was stunned, but NS shut that move down like it was nothing. She got locked down by magic to stop her from moving, and even though she tried to fight back, Ennis's power was just way too strong for her. Ennis refuses to lose, so she's ending the fight right now with a massive explosion that catches everyone's attention. Everyone saw her as the top pick for the next great sage because she could master fire, water, wind, earth, and even crazy lightning. Roy finally admitted Annette was a legit sorceress, but he could tell she was under massive pressure even though she looked totally cool on the outside. She was totally hyped after that insane match and couldn't stop staring at Anesta's bright hair, making it her goal to meet her one day and finally beat her, while Roy... That girl from the dance last night is actually NSL, and now she's bold enough to show up in a full-on bunny costume. Roy sneaks closer and catches her talking to herself, saying she's so relieved to finally be free from being a top wizard, the Prime Minister's daughter, and the King's niece, and she just wants this freedom to last forever. Anna was super worried her outfit showed way too much skin, and while Arui just stared at her totally confused, she was low-key panicking about being spotted again after yesterday, so Roy stepped in and told her she should definitely cover up. Guinness was totally caught off guard by how direct he was being. Roy told her to learn from her mess-ups and stop acting out for attention, but as he tried to find the intruder, the creepy vibe she felt just totally vanished. Roy dipped out of there, hoping she'd chill out now that she'd been caught, because if a Gallic spy found her first, they'd totally use her, and even though he felt bad for interrupting, he knew he was doing it for her own safety. During their session, Yukina noticed the training felt way easier than usual, and Roy told her it's because she's finally leveling up, making her realize he's actually an amazing mentor. Roy explained that these pro techniques take time to really kick in, but Yukina was... He totally caught her trying to copy his move, but he's chill with it as long as she's having a blast. And then Roy runs into NS, who's getting hyped up by... Out of nowhere, a breeze catches her skirt and all the guys stare, and while she acts all shy, our main guy is the only one who knows she totally did it on purpose. He decided it was finally time to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. Roy had no clue Yukina caught him staring at Ennis like a total creep, and now she's fuming because she thinks he's just another pervert, while Roy is left wondering why he even jumped in to help. As soon as it got dark, Roy headed back to the arena to check things out. The barrier was totally gone, but it didn't look like she had actually left yet. He looks around and remembers that forbidden spot near the forest, which is perfect for her love of danger. Roy knows Ennis can handle most of the monsters there, but if even one thing goes wrong, He knew things were about to get messy, so he bolted, wondering what her real plan was as he desperately searched for her. She was just chilling, taking a casual swim in the open pond right under the sky. She was busy fighting monsters in the middle of her bath, but Anus stepped in and totally wrecked them with her magic. But suddenly, one of those monsters snatched her clothes and was already making a run for it. Roy took out that monster just in time and handed Annie her clothes back. And while she was wondering who this mysterious guy was, he looked away and told her to get dressed, but she was so shocked she just let out a huge scream. She asks why he's even there, but Roy just tells her she should probably go get dressed first. Ennis is freaking out about what Roy's gonna do, but he promises he's chill and hands her some clothes, right before her underwear drops straight to the floor. The girl is dying of embarrassment, and Roy thinks it's super weird that she's swimming totally naked while freaking out about her underwear, so he magics up a wooden box for her to. Once Annis finishes changing, she demands to know who he is, but Roy tells her to hold that thought because monsters are closing in, and they need to move fast. Annis tries to head out on her own, but Roy refuses to let her go into the night alone, even after she tells him to stay out of her business. Roy suddenly grabbed her, told her to stay quiet, and leaped straight into the sky, leaving her totally freaked out by how high they were. A little while later, Roy got her back to the academy and told her they were finally there. Ennis usually keeps her eyes shut, so the sudden light totally blinds her when she snaps them open, and just as Roy is about to head out, she catches a glimpse of his face and realizes it's actually Roy Level, that failed nobleman. Running into him was the perfect chance to get some answers, but Roy immediately wanted to know how she even knew his name. But more importantly, he wanted her to explain her super weird habits before she even thought about asking him for a favor. Ennis was totally shocked and told him to stop calling it a weird habit, so Roy joked it was an exhibition hobby instead, leaving her even more confused until she finally admitted she only does it because everyone expects her to be the next legendary sage. She doesn't think she's cut out to be a legendary sage, and Roy isn't even shocked since he noticed her mana was super weak every time she used magic. She thinks she's just not cut out to be a great sage, and he totally agrees, telling her she's actually right about that. Anna admits she loves this school and has to stay a top student, which Roy realizes is why she's so stressed, thinking that if he were actually a bad guy, he would have totally attacked her while her guard was down. Hennessy totally caught him off guard by saying she's basically a magnet for trouble in a place like this. And since she's used to Nen staring at her, her confidence made him. Roy tells her straight up that he saw her because of how she was sitting, which makes her freak out and hit herself. But when he tells her to stop being awkward, she fires back that he should be the one blushing. Roy just acts cool, saying he's seen so many pretty girls that he's basically immune, and even though Anna thinks he's just a failed noble, she's dying to know who he actually is. She thought he could beat the sixth, but after seeing him lately, she knows he's way more powerful. Roy told her being a baron's son is a total drag, and since she totally gets that, he asked if he's only helping her because she's a noble too. He told them that's part of the reason, but honestly, he just can't look the other way. She was totally backed into a corner and losing it, so he decided to step in and help her out. Ennis was totally shocked Roy was actually helping her out, but he made it clear he'd only do what he could and warned her that her weird habit had to stop, so she agreed to his deal. Then she turned to him and asked for a massive favor. Favorite just kept following her around as his own weird way of saying hello. He thought he was in the clear, but he had absolutely no idea what was coming. The next day, he found out he'd been made the student council president's assistant without even being asked. Anna told Roy he'd get to work with the president and boost his rank since she didn't want a guy who beat a master fencer to just slack off, and while he agreed to be her assistant until she finally stopped those weird stretches, and while Ennis was hyped, student council life got way more exhausting. Later, he asked if she liked reading to relax. Since this whole stunt was actually for a school project, Ennis started showing off for the crowd, and Roy officially lost all hope for her. She heads back to the student council room feeling better, but Roy tells her to get her act together since they're on the same team. Then he scolds her and asks if she bolted, and Roy totally got why, so he backed off a bit just to help her chill out. He took her to a bakery for some coffee and sweets, and the owner immediately recognized her, hooking them up with the absolute best treats in the shop. Roy watched her from a distance, thinking this plan might actually work out. Ennis came back looking totally grossed out because she hates black coffee, but she only drank it to look mature as the student council president since the bakery wouldn't let her swap it, so Roy decided to take her somewhere private next time so she could finally. While Annette was busy blasting fireballs at the sacred training grounds, Roy walked up to say hey, but she totally froze when she saw NSL standing right behind him and quickly greeted them both. Ennis walks up to Annette and says she knows all about her drama at the academy, which totally shocks Annette. Annette explains that Roy brought her here so she could finally use. Roy and the gang tried to help Ennis chill out by cooking and even called in Roy's sister Reena for backup, but the second Ennis started, Reena smelled something burning. But her first try was a total disaster. The kitchen was a total disaster zone with food scattered everywhere, and Reena was shocked that the perfect student council president Annie could be such a mess. Annie felt terrible and apologized, but Reena told her straight up that while her brother might spoil her, she was going to be way more strict. We told Reena to chill since Ennis just wanted to relax, but she's already gone into full drill sergeant mode with these cooking lessons. Even Roy can't step in to save Ennis. After they finished cooking, Rory apologized in the student council room, but Ennis didn't mind since the omelet was actually fire, and she was so drained that she just crashed with her head on his lap while Rory stayed still and asked if she was comfortable. She just told him she was totally wiped out and needed to stay like this for a little longer. Looking back, she realized they really tried their best to chill today, and even though it was a struggle, she actually had a great time. Roy was still low-key worried since the real problem wasn't fixed, but he told her not to sweat it because school's out for 3 weeks soon, and Ennis has to go beef up the barrier at Yeha. Back at the academy, Roy admits she's a total legend who does way too much for everyone else, so it's no wonder she's always wiped out. And while he's hoping, he's got one trip set but no other plans, so he'll mostly be chilling at home, and Ennis is loving that because she's clearly got a secret idea up her sleeve. A few days later, Linus totally caught Roy and Reena off guard by telling them they were heading to the Empire of Lutetia right away, since the Prime Minister had just called a sudden meeting to talk about the future. Linus heard Roy was getting cozy with the Prime Minister's daughter and was totally hyped that his son was such a ladies' man. But Roy was just weirded out by the sudden attention, suspecting Ennis was behind it all while Rin straight up warned her family not to act like fools and embarrass her. They finally reached Ellen's estate in the Lutetia Empire, where Ennis met Roy and Linus told Prime Minister Ellen it's been 12 long years since they last saw each other. 12 years ago during the war, they were both legendary strategists. And even though Langa asked Ennis was finally joining the Elite 12 mages, she had to take a break and really wanted Reena. Elange walks over to meet Linus's kids, Roy and Reena, and after Roy gives a polite hello, Elange mentions that Reena is so pretty she probably deals with annoying guys all the time, which is a struggle he totally understands because of his own daughter. Roy could tell the Prime Minister was secretly fuming even though he acted happy about Roy and his daughter, and after getting a low-key warning to stay in his lane, it was obvious Lang totally hated them being together. Linus was hyped about their private villa, and while Rinus was busy geeking out over the city views and shops, Linus mentioned that his son Liam would be way too stressed around the Prime Minister. But then Roy suddenly got a bad vibe that Linus caught right away. Linus told Reena they should finally check out that shop she liked, and she was totally hyped. She asked Roy to come along, but he said he was beat and just wanted to chill. The swarm morphed into the Great Sage Eclipse, and he was super annoyed that he couldn't even get a moment of peace. Those magic dolls pulled out guns and started blasting away, so Eclipse grabbed his insane divine lightning spear to fight back. He has to trash all those magic dolls at once, but he's certain that if the Gallia Empire is actually serious, there's no way this is their only move. There's definitely something way bigger going on. Watching the eclipse from far away, the puppeteer realized the Great Sage's power was the real deal, and decided it was time to make things way more chaotic. During dinner, Elange apologized for his daughter being too busy to show up. And even though Linus didn't say anything, he was low-key sad he couldn't hang out with her, especially after Elange called her the heart of the whole empire. The king wants his daughter to become the ultimate sage to win back the people's trust. But Allange is starting to worry that this massive burden will only end up hurting her. He's totally crushed because he begged the legendary Eclipse to train his daughter, but Eclipse just kept saying she wasn't the right fit. Linus even poked fun at him, hinting that she's in total agony. But right then, Anna shows up and apologizes for being late. So Linus invites her to dinner, and after she explains she was busy with work, Ennis finally unbuttoned her coat because she was totally done with that tight outfit she wore for the king all day. But now she looked super out of place in her baggy clothes. They told her to just relax and get into some comfy clothes without stressing over dinner, and even though she was scared she'd miss the food, Roy kept eating so she wouldn't feel forced to join him right away. A bit later, Ellange pulls Roy aside to the living room to ask if Ennis is being a total headache. But Roy admits it's not exactly trouble. Ennis is just starting to feel the pressure. Lang was super worried and explained that Ennis has been shy since she was a kid, so she really hoped Roy could be that rare friend who helps her feel safe and relaxed. He knows he's the one stressing his kid out, and since Roy totally gets how a dad feels, he promises to do whatever it takes to help NF. Allange thanked him and officially put Roy in charge of looking after his dodo. Roy realizes that NS is actually super lonely, because everyone just sees her as a powerful title, and being one of the 12 strongest mages with no real friends to lean on has her totally burnt out and exhausted. Roy decided to become Eclipse just so he could stay close to NS and have her back in his own way. In Chapter 14, Eclipse tells Prime Minister Ellen about the magic dolls he wrecked, and while she's counting on him for future trouble, he suddenly points out that the 12 wizards mostly give their jobs to young women. L&G says most mages here are just total research nerds, so the king usually asks his family for help and lets Annis handle the public spotlight. But Eclipse reminded her that she needs to hit the books if she actually wants to become a legendary sage. Allange had to report to the king himself, but he was terrified of making things even messier until Eclipse told him to just say Annis's magic was still weak, which would hopefully force. The gatekeeper mentioned he should have heard the news by now. Eclipse was the one who called Valor here on an emergency, even though Valor was super busy. Eclipse explained that he did it. Eclipse told them both to reach out to another 12 million people. Laura started dumping way more work on the team, and while Eclipse expected them to just deal with it, L-Engine got a bad vibe that she was actually trying to steal his student away. Eclipse made it totally clear that he was just going to start looking out for the younger kids. War is breaking out and Ennis is a total beast at magic, but he tells Helene she's just not ready to be a great sage because she isn't nearly sharp or destructive enough yet. Ellen finally understands Eclipse's plan, and since he promised to make a world where Ennis can become the great sage, they've got to fix the kingdom and bring back peace first. Roy heads back to Ellen's place where Ennis asks what he thinks of her dress, but he tells her straight up that it shows way too much skin. She just wanted to look good for the massive party celebrating the sage-crushing 400,000 imperial soldiers. So after Roy tells her to cover up, she spends 30 minutes trying on clothes before finally making him pick the winner. Hannah's hyped for the big festival tomorrow, but Roy acts totally cold and tells her to just eat whatever she wants, which honestly shocks her. So she asks him to show her around and he agrees to go if she guides him through Lutetia first. Roy picked out a stunning off-the-shoulder dress for her that matched her jade green eyes perfectly. And when he complimented her, she teased him about being a smooth talker, though he was totally clueless as they headed to the big victory party. They spotted Annette and said hey, but then a crowd started swarming NS1 to say hi, so Roy realized she'd be stuck for a while and just asked Annette what she was doing there. She told them the Guardian sent her there on a mission to start linking up with everyone. She's totally clueless when it comes to talking to people since she just learned how to act proper. And even though Roy promised to introduce her around once Ennis gets back, she's shaking with nerves. He asked for her name, but the second Annette mentioned the Saunier family, the guy realized they were disgraced and totally ghosted her. Annette was super offended, and it only got worse when Roy tried to jump in and protect her, but Annette held him back and told him she had it all under control. Let's be real, she totally doesn't belong in a place like this. Roy stayed by Annette's side until Ennis finally showed up, and Ennis could tell right away that she was feeling pretty rough. After Roy told Ennis to look after her, Ennis took charge and started showing her the ropes around the area. A messenger tells Ennis the king is calling for her, and even though she's worried about leaving Ed, he tells her to go and promises he'll be back for her as soon as he can. Roy had a plan in mind and headed out, remembering his mom's advice to live life on his own terms, so he followed his heart and transformed into a total eclipse. It's wild how some fallen nobles have insane skills that nobody sees, while others are forced to keep titles they don't even want. So he decided to take charge and rewrite the rules of freedom for everyone, all by himself.